Small Island by Andrea Levy. Standing at the door of a house in London and ringing the bell, pushing my finger to hear the ding-dong. Oh, Celia Langley, where were you with your big ideas and your nose in the air? Could you see me? Could you see me there in London? Hortense Roberts married with a gold ring and a wedding dress in a trunk. Mrs. Joseph, Mrs. Gilbert Joseph. What do you think of that, Celia Langley? There was I in England ringing the doorbell of one of the tallest houses I had ever seen. But when I pressed this doorbell, I did not hear a ring. No ding-dong. I pressed once more in case the doorbell was not operational. The house I could see was shabby. Mark you, shabby in a grand sort of way. I was sure this house could have once been home to a doctor or a lawyer, or perhaps a friend of the king's. Only the house of someone high class would have pillars at the doorway. Ornate pillars that twisted with elaborate design. The glass stained with colored pictures as a church would have. It was true that some were missing, replaced by cardboard and strips of white tape. But who knows what devilish deeds Mr. Hitler's bombs carried out during the war. I pushed the doorbell again when it was obvious no one was answering my call. I held my thumb against it and pressed my ear to the window. A light came on now and a woman's voice started calling. All right, I'm coming. Give us a minute. I stepped back down 2 steps, avoiding a small lump of dog's business that rested in some litter and leaves. I straightened my coat, pulling it closed where it had unfortunately lost a button. I adjusted my hat in case it sagged in the damp air and left me looking comical. I pulled my back up straight. The door was answered by an English woman, a blonde-haired, pink-cheeked English woman with eyes so blue they were the brightest thing in the street. She looked on my face, parted her slender lips and said, Yes. Is this the household of Mr. Gilbert Joseph? I beg your pardon? Gilbert Joseph, I said a little slower. Oh, Gilbert! Who are you? She pronounced Gilbert so strangely that for a moment I was anxious that I would be delivered to the wrong man. Mr. Gilbert Joseph is my husband. I am his wife. The woman's face looked puzzled and pleased all at one time. She looked back into the house, lifting her head as she did. She looked back into the house, lifting her head as she did. She turned back to me and said, Didn't he come to meet you? I have not seen Gilbert, I told her, then went on to ask, But this is perchance where he is abiding? At which this Englishwoman said, What? She frowned and looked over my shoulder at the trunk which was resting by the curbside where it had been placed by the driver of the taxi vehicle. Is that yours? She inquired. It is. It's the size of the Isle of Wight. How did you get it here? She laughed a little, a gentle giggle that played round her eyes and mouth. I laughed too, so as not to give her the notion that I did not know what she was talking about as regards this white island. I said, I came in a taxi cab and the driver assured me that this was the right address. Is this the house of Gilbert Joseph? The woman stood for a little while before answering by saying, Hang on here, I'll see if he's in his room. She then shut the door in my face. And I wondered, how could a person only 5 feet 6 inches tall, 5 feet 7 if I was wearing my wedding shoe heels, how could such a person get to be top of this tall house? Ropes and pulleys was all I could conceive. Ropes and pulleys to hoist me up. We had stairs in Jamaica, even in our single-story houses. We had stairs that lifted visitors onto the veranda and another that took them into the kitchen. There were stairs at my college up to the dormitories that housed the pupils on two separate floors. I was very familiar with stairs, but all my mind could conjure up as I looked up at this tall house was ropes and pulleys. It was obvious that I had been on a ship for too long.
My mirror spoke to me. It said, "Man, women gonna fall at your feet." In my uniform of blue, from the left, from the right, from behind, I looked like a god. And this uniform did not even fit me so well. But what is a little bagging on the waist and tightness under the arm when you are a gallant member of the British Royal Air Force? Put several thousand Jamaican men in uniform, coop them up a while, grand old Duke of York style. You march them up to the top of the hill and then back down again, and they will think of nothing but women. When they are up, they will imagine them, and when they are down, they will dream of them. But not this group I travelled with to America. Not Hubert, not Fulton, not Lenval, not James, not even me. Because every last one of us was too preoccupied with food. The only flesh we conjured was the sort you chewed and swallowed. This was war. There was hardship I was prepared for. Bullet, bomb and casual death. But not the torture of missing cow foot stew. Not for the persecution of living without curried shrimp or pepper pot soup. I was not ready. I was not trained to eat the food that was prepared in a pan of boiling water, the sole purpose of which was to rid it of taste and texture. How the English built empires when their armies marched on nothing but mush should be one of the wonders of the world. I thought it would be combat that would make me regret having volunteered. Not boiled up potatoes, boiled up vegetables, grey and limp on the plate like it had been eaten once before. Why the English come to cook everything by this method? Lucky they kept that boiling business as their national secret and did not insist that people of their colonies stop frying and spicing up their food. A middle-aged man, not in uniform, kept his hands resolutely in his pockets before addressing me. Eyeing intently the young woman, who was by now getting on very nicely with Lucky Fulton, consorting with him as we had been assured no white woman would. This man, not looking on my face as he spoke to me, "Why would you leave a nice sunny place to come here if you didn't have to?" When I said, "To fight for my country, sir," his eyebrows jumped like two caterpillars in a polka. Your country?" he asked, without need of an answer. He then took the young woman's arm, guiding her, reluctant as she was, away from Fulton and the group. Let me ask you to imagine this. Living far from you is a beloved relation whom you have never met. Yet this relation is so dear, akin she is known as mother. Your own mummy talks of mother all the time. Oh, mother is a beautiful woman, refined, mannerly and cultured. Like the Lord above, she takes care of you from afar. There are many valorous tales told of her, which enthrall grown men as well as children. Her photographs are cherished, pinned in your own family album to be admired over and over. Your finest, your best, everything that you have is worthy, is sent to mother as gifts. And on a birthday, you sing songs and party. Then one day, you hear mother calling. She is in trouble. She needs your help. Your mummy, your daddy say go, leave home, leave familiar, leave love. Travel seas with waves that swell above you as concrete buildings. Shiver, tire, hunger, for no sacrifice is too much to see you at mother's needy side. This surely is adventure. After all you have heard, can you imagine? Can you believe soon you will meet mother? The filthy tramp that greets you is she. Ragged, old and dusty as the long dead. Mother has a blackened eye, bad breath, and one lone tooth that waves in her head when she speaks. Can this be the fabled relation you heard so much of? This twisted, crooked, weary woman? This stinking, cantankerous hag? She offers you no comfort after your journey. No smile, no welcome. Yet she looks down at you through lordly eyes and say, "Who the bloody hell are you?" Okay, Gilbert, you have gone too far. I can hear you say. You know I am talking of England. You know I am speaking of the mother country. But Britain was at war. You might want to tell me, of course, she would not be at her best.
It was my fault that Bernard volunteered for the RAF before waiting to be asked. Men not in uniform began to look out of place in streets rolling in blue and khaki. With us having to import Yanks and him still wearing what he liked, he was self-conscious, apologetic even. But it wasn't that. It was all that catastrophe that dodged in behind me every time I came home from the rest centre. And when he tried to turn away, he'd looked straight into another wall, scarred into the face of his own father. He had to join up, and the RAF wanted him. A skinny bank clerk who always blew on his tea before he drank it. A man who had trouble finding enough rage to scare next door's cat out of our shelter. And it wasn't just that the military could see his wiry frame fitting into any desk space, no matter how small. Bernard was become part of their fighting machine. They were sending him overseas. Mr. Todd slapped his back, saying, "Good show, Bernard, good man." People who had never before passed the time of day with me after my husband, and when I talked about him, I plumped almost as proud as Auntie Dorothy with Montgomery. I swear his shoulders got broader, his hands more manly with every leave. Even the back of his neck looked fearless with the collar of his RAF blues pressing against it. I was almost jealous now. Someone else wanted him. He's my husband. Where are you sending him? Training in Skegness and Blackpool. He was home more often than he used to be. But overseas? Where overseas? How far? We live on an island, for God's sake. Everywhere's blinking overseas. He left with no more ceremony than if he was going to the bank. I wanted to hug him, whisper into his ear, to be sure to tell me what he was doing, to show me what he was seeing in all those foreign places. But he stiffened like a plank of best mahogany, then bent to kiss my cheek. Watching him walking down our road, his forage cap sitting on an angle on his head, his kit bag lolling like a corpse over his shoulder, I thought. He's so thin that any enemy soldier would have to have a ruddy good aim to hit him. It was a strange thought. Not one I'd have shared with anyone, but funnily enough, I found it comforting. The pity of it was he wouldn't have known that I was watching him through the window, let alone that I was worrying. And when he was finally out of view, the road screamed with emptiness. I couldn't help what came into my mind next. It just sneaked up behind me to sigh over my shoulder. You'll not be able to post it home, so you'll never get pregnant now, Queenie. For the teeth and glasses. That was the reason so many coloured people were coming to this country, according to my next-door neighbour, Mr. Todd. That National Health Service. It's pulling 'em in, Mrs. Bligh. Giving things away at our expense or keep 'em coming, he said. He might have had a point, except, according to him, they were all cross-eyed and goofy before they got here. I don't think so, I said. Oh, yes, he assured me. But now, of course, they've got spectacles and perfect grins.
Think before you write, the paper urged me, pointed at the top with 2 exclamation marks. Think. I held my pen above that blue flimsy paper on that prison floor. Held it there for so long that the sweat trickled down my arm and dripped off the nib like teardrops. Soon the paper was too soggy to write on, and Dear Queenie had blurred to a blue stain, then running was just a blot. Letters went astray. Part of many chaps' grievances. We move so much, you see. In India, it could take months for a letter to catch up. Some never made it. Misunderstandings passing unknown in the post. Bernard, you've been away such a long time. How could I doubt I owed Queenie an explanation? Almost impossible to fashion the words. How to begin to tell? It had been over 2 years since my ship had docked at Southampton. England had shrunk. It was smaller than the place I'd left. Streets, shops, houses, they bore down like crowds, stifling even the feeble light that got through. Behind every face I saw were trapped the remembering of war, the remembering, guarded by a smile, shrouded in a frown. But everyone had them. Private conflicts, scarring where touched. No point dwelling on your own pitiful story, and silence was the only balm that healed. I never doubted I was doing the right thing, even on days when the longing for familiar was as substantial as hunger. To lie with Queenie and to gaze on objects that communed in memories. I had no idea how long the awful disease would take to claim me. No thought of doctors or cures. Shame sort of that. My only worry was that I'd lose my mind. Do something rash without Sally's firm hand. But in waiting to die, I felt fit. Found employment, cleaning tables in a cafe. The proprietor, rather dim fellow, needed a hand with his bookkeeping. He was tickled pink that his worthless waiter turned out to be useful. He told all his chums, and soon I had a few of them calling on my services. I stopped being a waiter, and double-entry bookkeeping earned me enough for board and lodging. I expected Queenie to be shocked. Could hardly blame her. Husband, back from the dead. But I didn't foretell that appalled would play for quite so long around the corners of her mouth. Sitting there, clutching her stomach, speechless, pale, shaking, eyes rimmed red, she looked older, more careworn. She put on some weight. I'd watched her wither away during that early part of the war, day by day. It's not the only husband who'd felt impotent about that. So little Plump looked well on her. Oh, Bernard, I wrote to you. Where have you been? Why didn't you come straight back? Her terrified eyes demanded the more urgent answer. Lost my mind a little, I said. How do you mean? Did you lose your memory? Yeah, something like that. Where were you? On the south coast. In England. Brighton. Brighton? She screamed. I want an answer first, Bernard. I've a right to know. I'm your wife. I thought you were dead. It's been years and you just turn up and say, Brighton? As soon as I walked in the house, I knew he was gone. Pa's chair was no longer by the fire. Your father's dead, she said a little too promptly. Oh, I said. Oh, is that all you can say? Oh. That's what war had done to me. Made death the reasonable thing. She was quite hysterical. The bones in her neck were standing out like scaffolding. She was screeching at me. There was a loud knocking on the door. I thought the person would break it down. I answered it, to find a black man standing there. He looked straight past me, calling, "Queenie, Queenie, you all right?" And the cheeky blighter looked at me and said, "Who are you?"